All right, so back here on the 1978 Toyota pickup, going to be another short update because I didn't feel like recording all the boxing and gusseting and all that stuff. So, got it all finished, welded up. So, all along the sides of the tops, this section here was open, and so I just put some 16 gauge over the end cap. So all along this edge down to the bottom there is just a plate of 16 gauge that I bent up. And you see me just use the paper template and bend those in place like a couple dozens of times. So I didn't want to record any more of that. And then these are the spacers and the gussets that came with it, where the lower control arm comes through. So got all that finished welded up. And so also, in addition to, welding it all the way around, I also put a box plate on the top here. And so I just covered this in just to give it a bit more rigidity and just to kind of keep crap out of there. So this was open. And so if any dirt or whatever is coming up underneath the top hat, because, this is outside the engine bay, I didn't want it coming up under here and splashing into the engine bay. So got that covered in. And, it was so nice to be welding some of the heavier stuff. I've been doing all all this work up in here with the sheet metal. That's all 18 gauge and even some 20 gauge, I think. And then, the brackets and stuff are 16. But you got to stitch weld all that. So all those things got to get stitch weld. So it's just zap, 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 zap all the way through. And then you got to come back and grind it, which is a giant pain in the ass. But yeah, with this heavier stuff, you just run a bead across it and, just crank up the machine, set it up for the right thickness. So, everything that I did was 3/16 plate. And so you just can just run a bead across it real fast, which is, like I said, so much nicer than stitch welding sheet metal. I got both sides done. And so, both the passenger and the driver's side are done. Same plate on both sides, welded all the way around. And then same thing over here, got that all boxed in. I don't know if it's necessary to have this lower part boxed. It's just that I didn't want to have all the junk of the road going in there. I think probably, folks that would have put this in with a wider frame, they would have been cutting this side of it. And then, all this inner piece is all boxed in already. And so that's already boxed. And so my guess is because I had to cut on this side instead of this side, that, this was open because they figured people were going to be cutting into this side. But yeah, no big deal. I don't think that it, the rigidity there is necessary. It just keep crap out of it, honestly. This was all open, and so I didn't want to have dirt and grime and mud and leaves and stuff getting up in there. One thing that's kind of hilarious is these are the old holes for where the frame mounted, and I didn't even think about it at the time, but these go all the way through. So this goes all the way through, and hilariously it goes inside of the new crossmember. So I think that I'll be able to run, I got a frame kit a long time ago. Shit, it's up there. I ain't gonna grab it. But it's just basically a big old hose that you hook on the end of a spray can, and you can feed that hose inside of frame rails or rockers or whatever in order to kind of spray on the inside of stuff. I think, hilariously, that could be the hole that I can use. I was thinking that I was going to have to put a hole in that cross member, at one point, spray it out, clean it out, whatever, and then get some primer and paint on the inside of the cross member. But you know, coincidentally, I think them holes are going to work just fine for me to be able to fish that in there and get that sprayed on the inside. Underneath here, there's a little bitty gap that I left on both sides, and so if anything does get in there, hopefully that, you know, that's just a little bit of drainage on both sides. Again, I was thinking that maybe I'd have to put a hole in the cross member somewhere in order to spray, you know, maybe put a hole here, I don't know, in order to feed something in there in order to spray the inside. But I think that's probably going to work, to just use that existing hole, which is hilarious. You know, mostly whenever I get involved with something, I end up having to do a lot more work for no damn reason, but maybe this time I'll get lucky. We'll see. But then also looking through here, there's so many extra holes. You know, these are extra holes here that were from the previous stuff. They are all over the place. I mean, there are holes all over this thing that I know I'm not going to need. And so I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do here. You know, a lot of these are threaded with the captured nut on the other side, so I can't even put like a grommet in there. So we'll see. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I can just put a bolt in there in order to keep crap out of the frame. Some of them pass straight through, so I don't really care. You know, I'll fish something in there in order to get some paint on the inside of it. But that's not going to get inside the frame rail. But these old screw holes, those do get inside of the frame, and that'll just get crap built up in there. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that. So, but yeah, this is a big old step. So top hats, cross member, spacers, gussets, everything in place. Looking real good. So that's all squared away. I did separate the engine from the trans, and so after I did try to test fit the engine, and I for sure need to get a rear sump pan, so I had to take the transmission off, and then I just put the engine over here on a little engine stand. It's all cockeyed, which is annoying the hell out of me, but the pinholes that are in there, I don't have one that'll get it straighter than it is now. And man, I monkeyed with this thing forever trying to get holes that would line up in order to get this in there. I mean, it just, I don't know about that plate that's in there, but man, it took forever. Like I couldn't get, when I tried to use these outer ones everywhere, it was too much distance. And so like if I tried to use this one over here and that one over there, I couldn't get it. They were too far apart, so I couldn't use those ones. And so I got all kinds of wonky hardware. I got a random bolt here, and they're all different sizes and shapes. It was a freaking pain in the ass to get that on there. And it's cockeyed, which is, like I said, is annoying me. But I did get the trans off of there, and looking at the pan, the new pan that I got to get, you can see this is a front sump, and this just hits right up on the steering. And so there's no way, like I can't possibly run it that way. I checked the measurements and everything to see if I could just raise the engine up and have the pan above the steering rack, and it would be too high. I'd never be able to close the hood. You know, and I don't want to do some gigantic cowl hood thing. I'm not into that. So, so what'll end up happening is I bought the new rear sump kit, and then instead of the sump being in the front, it'll be in the back here, and that'll be on the opposite side of the cross member. And so the good thing about that is even if the pan, you know, is gonna touch the cross member or something, which I really doubt. I mean, this Mustang 2 cross member sits super low, way down below the frame, so I really don't think that I'm going to have any issues. But if I do, that's not a big deal. I can notch that cross member. You know, that can be notched and boxed in and everything. That's not a problem. But, you know, in the front with the hitting the steering rack, like, that's nothing. They ain't fixing that. I'd have to go to like some crazy ass rear steer, making up some crappy thing, which would be terrible. So got one of those on order. Hopefully get it this weekend or maybe early next week and swap that in. So that should be pretty good. It also give me an excuse. You know, that pan's busted. And so I was going to have to replace just the pan, not the entire sump and assembly. And so I was going to have to take that off anyway. And this will actually give me the excuse to take the whole bottom end of that off and inspect the mains and all that stuff. While I'm there, you know, I got a whole engine kit, and, you know, I'll go ahead and replace like the front and rear main seals. You know, I'll take, you know, when I take that pan off, I'll take the crank pulley off and everything. I'll do the front seal. I got a timing set. There's all kinds of engine work that's, you know, pending. I just ordered the mess of parts, and so I got to wait on all those. So that's going to be all right. Speaking of parts, so this is the engine seal kit. It's got everything, which is great. So I got every single gasket, head gasket, and valve covers, and front and rear mains, and everything. Turbo seals, you name it. So I got a gigantic gasket set, the entire engine, which I'll replace all of those, which is cool. Got clutch and master and slave cylinder, head studs and springs and valves and all kinds of goodies. And so, you know, slowly accumulating all the stuff that I need in order to take that apart. I will wait to take the head off, because you see where the hook is. So the hook mounts to the head. And so while I'd love to take the head off and send it off to get hot dipped and all that other crap, I'd love to do that, but, you know, then it'd be impossible for me to test fit the engine, because there's not going to be a nice way to bolt that. And I don't really want crap getting in the cylinders and everything. So I'm going to wait until I can do the final test fit of this inside of the engine bay and make sure that this is going to be all right, which again, I got to wait in order to get the new pan installed on there. So sort of, you know, waiting on that a little bit. Other thing that I got, which is super cool, is I did send away the stock turbos to get rebuilt. And so, you know, a company, you know, they get a hold of these turbos, and then these come with a ceramic impellers, and then they replace them with stainless steel, and they clean it all up, make it all purty, and get a new wastegate valve on there and the whole 9 yards. You know, they clean up the threads and all of your fittings, and, you know, just basically get you a brand new set of turbos, which is pretty slick. You know, the stock turbos will be running out around, you know, 300, 350 horsepower. And from what I hear, this is good to more like 450. And so I won't be making any close to that kind of power initially, but, you know, does mean that I can keep the stock twins on there, which I think is cooler than, you know, going to like a single turbo setup. And, you know, everything should be all cleaned up and ready to go, which is pretty awesome. So excited about that. So yeah, I mean, you know, making some really good progress. I think everything I got is looking really good. I think, you know, hopefully I can get that new oil pan squared away, and I can do some test fitting of that engine in that bay there. So yeah, looking pretty good. All right, thanks. See you in the next one.